Okay, I want you to imagine, just for a second, two completely different worlds. Really try to visualize this. So on one side, you have the concrete cracked pavement of Staten Island, New York. It's 1993.
Right.
It's the height of the crack epidemic. It's freezing cold. That wind is just cutting through your jacket. The whole atmosphere it's heavy with danger. It's survival mode, 24/7.
The definition of gritty. I mean, it's a place where you have to watch your back constantly.
Right. But then on the other side, picture this. The misty mountains of ancient China, or like the hyperkinetic neon explosions of a Japanese anime.
Total opposite.
Totally. You've got monks in orange robes meditating in bamboo forests, finding inner peace, and then warriors shooting energy blasts from their hands to save the universe.
On paper, those two worlds are. They're oil and water. They should not mix. In fact, they feel like they belong in different galaxies.
And yet, if you were listening to the radio back in the early 90s, specifically if you were tuning into a group called the Wu-Tang Clan, those worlds didn't just mix. They collided. And they created something arguably more influential than either of them were on their own.
It's a collision that, it really changed pop culture forever. It redefined what cool even looked like for a whole generation.
So here's the question we're starting with, and it sounds a little bit ridiculous at first. What does Goku from Dragon Ball really have in common with a rapper trying to survive the projects in New York City?
It sounds like the setup to a joke, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But the answer is actually, it's pretty profound. It goes way deeper than just, boys like fighting.
That is exactly what we are unpacking today. We've got this fascinating column from October 2025 by a cultural writer known as MMR. It's called Wu-Tang Clan and Japanese Anime Culture: Resonance of Eastern Thought and the Street. And the mission for this deep dive is to prove that this connection, it wasn't just about liking cartoons or watching kung fu flicks on a Saturday afternoon.
No, absolutely not. It was not just entertainment.
It's about how the Wu-Tang Clan used Asian culture as a spiritual weapon. So we're going to look at how they built this cultural bridge that connects everything from those gritty 90s kung fu movies to modern hits like Afro Samurai, Jujutsu Kaisen, and even the way modern rappers construct their identities today.
And the key takeaway here, the thing I want you to really hold on to as we go through this, is that it's a sociological study. It's about how oppressed communities use external knowledge, things completely outside their own lived experience, to reconstruct who they are.
That concept of reconstructing who they are is fascinating. So let's go back to the source. It's 1993. What does the musical landscape even look like? Because Wu-Tang, they did not fit in, not at first.
You have to remember the context of hip-hop then. The West Coast is just dominating. It's the era of the Chronic. It's Dr. Dre. It's Snoop Dogg.
G-Funk.
Sound is G-Funk. It's polished. It's melodic. It's rolling down the street in a convertible. It's party music, even when the lyrics are tough.
And then Wu-Tang drops their debut, Enter the Wu-Tang, 36 Chambers. And it sounds, well, it doesn't sound like a party.
It sounds like it came from a dungeon.
Yeah.
It was lo-fi, dusty, aggressive, distorted. Our source, MMR, actually describes it as alien art. It was this jarring mix of the brutal reality of street violence with this strange Buddhist tranquility.
That's the paradox, isn't it? They're rapping about selling drugs and turf wars and the harsh realities of the ghetto, but they're doing it while quoting Shaolin monks and talking about chambers of wisdom.
Exactly. And they didn't just rap about it. They literally renamed their geography. They started calling Staten Island Shaolin.
I always just thought that was cool slang, like calling New York the Big Apple or something. Just a nickname to sound cool on a track.
See, and that's where the source material gets really interesting.
Okay.
It argues this was way more than slang. It was cognitive reframing.
Cognitive reframing. That sounds like a term from therapy. Break that down for us.
Well, it is a psychological tool, but they were doing it instinctively.
Yeah.
If you look around your neighborhood and all you see is poverty, systemic neglect, broken windows, and danger, that's a bleak existence.
It feels hopeless.
It feels hopeless. You feel like a victim of your environment.
Yeah.
But if you take a mythical map and you overlay it onto your reality, suddenly things change.
So the housing projects aren't just housing projects anymore.
No. Now, they're the training grounds of the Shaolin Temple. The struggle isn't just senseless suffering anymore. It's a test of your spirit.
Wow.
The source argues that by renaming Staten Island Shaolin, the Wu-Tang Clan changed how they interacted with their own suffering. They weren't just kids stuck in a bad situation. They were monks being tested by the universe.
That is incredibly powerful. I mean, it gives meaning to the hardship. It turns the struggle into a curriculum.
Precisely. If you see yourself as a monk in training, every obstacle is just. It's a lesson. It's what the source calls the spiritual weapon. They weren't just sampling kung fu kicks for sound effects, they were sampling the philosophy to build a suit of armor for their minds.
And they were pulling from some heavy hitters, too. It wasn't just movie quotes. The source lists Bruce Lee, obviously.
Right, the philosophy of formless form, appearing weak when you are strong.
But also Sun Tzu's The Art of War and the teachings of Lao Tzu.
It was a synthesis. They took this high-level Eastern strategy stuff generals and emperors would use and applied it to street survival. The source points out that for Black youth facing social oppression in the 90s, this external knowledge, this wisdom from a culture that had nothing to do with the American police state or the crack epidemic, it became a tool for mental emancipation.
It's almost like they had to go halfway around the world to find a narrative that let them be heroes. The American narrative wasn't offering them that role.
That's a great way to put it. They had to look east to find a mirror that showed them as warriors instead of criminals. And that narrative structure, that leads us to the next big point in the article, the anime connection.
This is the part I was waiting for. Because I get the Kung Fu movie connection. Wu-Tang loves the Shaw Brothers films, it's obvious. But the source argues this philosophy is actually identical to the structure of Japanese anime.
Specifically, shonen anime.
Shonen, right.
Yeah. For anyone who might not be deep into the genre, shonen basically means boy in Japanese. It refers to a genre of anime and manga aimed at young men. So, think Dragon Ball Z, Naruto, One Piece, Demon Slayer.
So let's unpack this. What is the structural link between a Staten Island MC in a hoodie and, say, Naruto in a bright orange jumpsuit?
Training arc.
The training arc. Okay, tell me more.
Just think about the plot of every single one of those shows. You have a hero, usually an outsider, maybe an orphan, often underestimated or mocked by society. So what do they do when they face a villain they just can't beat?
They don't give up. They disappear for a while.
They go into isolation. They train relentlessly. Think of Goku doing push-ups in 100 times gravity on a spaceship. They push their bodies and minds past the breaking point to surpass their limits so they can defeat a powerful external enemy.
And the source is saying Wu-Tang viewed their lives the same way. That living in the hood was their 100 times gravity chamber.
Exactly. RZA, the spiritual leader of the clan, he actually reflected on this years later. The source paraphrases him saying something like, "Anime warriors were our lives, forging themselves in loneliness to fight the world."
Forging themselves in loneliness, that hits hard. It stops being about cartoons and starts sounding like, well, stoicism.
It is stoicism. The source even coins this term, anime stoicism. In the projects, you're often isolated by violence or poverty. You can't show weakness. If you cry, you're a target. So you build this samurai self-image, you keep a straight face, you discipline your mind, and you let your skills, your lyrical swordsmanship, do the talking.
So the recording booth becomes the dojo.
And the rap battle becomes the duel. It's all the same archetype. It's about self-transcendence, rising above your circumstances through sheer will and skill. The idea is just, I will outtrain you, and therefore I will defeat you.
So let's talk about how that actually sounded, though. Because we've talked about the philosophy, but how did Wu-Tang translate this whole Shaolin vibe into audio?
Right.
You mentioned the West Coast had this polished funk sound. Wu-Tang was the opposite.
The source breaks this down into phases. And phase 1 is the 90s, which MMR calls symbolic sound.
This is the 36 chambers era.
Exactly. If you go back and listen to those tracks, really listen to the background layers. It's not just drums and bass samples from old soul records. RZA was bringing in these very specific textures.
Like what?
Wood blocks, koto strings, shakuhachi flutes, temple bells.
And these weren't just random samples he found in a crate and thought, oh, that sounds cool.
No, they were totally intentional. The source calls them auditory symbols. RZA was using these sounds to transport you, the listener. When you hear that mournful flute or that sharp percussive wood block, you're not in New York anymore. You're in a mythical landscape. You are entering the 36th chamber.
It creates tension, too. It's not relaxing music. It feels like you're about to get into a fight.
Not at all. It's discipline. It creates this mood of martial tension. But, and this is where the evolution happens, the source says that as we move into the 2000s, this changes. It stops being just about sampling old records and starts becoming about a real connection.
This is phase 2, direct collaboration.
Exactly. The fascination moves from just consuming old culture to actually building with the culture. The artists start collaborating directly with Japanese creators.
The example that stood out to me here was Ghostface Killah. He starts as Tony Stark's, which is Iron Man from Marvel Comics, a very American reference.
Right. But look at how his aesthetic shifts over the years. He starts leaning so heavily into the anime visuals, the robes, the weaponry on his album covers. But the pivotal moment, the real turning point, according to the source where this becomes a genuine dialogue, it involves RZA and a Japanese producer named Nujabes.
Oh man, Nujabes. For anyone who doesn't know, can you give a quick primer on who that is? Because he is a legend.
Nujabes was a visionary Japanese hip-hop producer. He's often credited as the godfather of lo-fi hip-hop, that chill, jazzy beat style everyone studies too on YouTube now. He did this soundtrack for an anime called Samurai Champloo.
And RZA knew him.
RZA respected him immensely. They actually collaborated. And this is crucial because it marks that shift from appropriation, just taking a sound because it's exotic, or cool, to mutual creation. RZA recognized Nujabes as a fellow traveler. They were speaking the same musical language, just from opposite sides of the planet.
That validates the whole experiment, doesn't it? It proves that the Shaolin identity wasn't just some costume RZA was wearing. It was a real artistic connection that resonated with people who actually lived in that culture.
Which brings us to what you could call the peak fusion. If you want to see the moment where these two worlds just became one, you have to look at 2007. The project was Afro Samurai.
I remember when this came out, it felt like a fever dream. It was just so stylish.
It really was this global mashup. Think about the layers here. You have a Japanese animation studio producing it. The source material is a Japanese manga. But the protagonist is a black samurai.
Voiced by Samuel L. Jackson.
The quintessential cool black American actor. You could not pick a more iconic voice. And the music, produced by RZA.
Of course.
The source analyzes Afro Samurai not just as a cool show, but as a symbolic transformation.
How so?
In Afro Samurai, the samurai was no longer just a Japanese historical figure. He was redefined as an embodiment of hip-hop ethics. The source uses this great metaphor to explain the show's logic. The sword equals the microphone.
And the battles.
The battle equals the rap battle. The plot of Afro Samurai is literally about a warrior walking through a hostile world, wearing the number 2 headband, challenging the owner of the number 1 headband. He has to defeat rivals one by one to climb the ladder.
That is exactly the structure of a rapper's career. You're battling your way to the top of the charts, to be the GOAT, to be number 1.
Exactly. The imagery aligned perfectly. A lone warrior, lyrical dexterity translated into swordplay, facing down challengers. For RZA, this was the victory lap. The Japanese creators were looking at him and saying, yes, you understand this spirit. Let's build this story together.
It really cemented the bond. So Wu-Tang kicked open the door in the 90s. Afro Samurai proved the connection was legitimate in the 2000s. Now we're in the 2020s and beyond. What's the legacy of this? Because the source argues it's everywhere.
It is everywhere.
Yeah.
MMR calls this section the modern impact, and it's a two-way street now. First, let's just look at the U.S. side. Wu-Tang opened the window for today's superstars.
We see this constantly. Tyler, the creator, referencing Evangelion. Kanye West using Akira visuals in his music videos.
And look at Megan Thee Stallion, or Lil Uzi Vert. This is a big shift. For Wu-Tang, the anime stuff was gritty, philosophical, almost religious. For Megan and Uzi, it's about otaku culture. They're celebrating the fandom itself.
Megan Thee Stallion literally cosplays on stage. She dresses up as characters from My Hero Academia or Jujutsu Kaisen while performing hit songs. It's wildly different from RZA in a hoodie.
Right, but the expert insight here is that despite the aesthetic difference, this isn't just nerding out. It's a continuation of that Eastern fantasy as a tool for self-reconstruction.
Unpack that a bit. How is Megan cosplaying the same as RZA being a monk?
When Megan dresses as a powerful anime character, she's channeling that character's strength. She's adopting an alter ego to navigate the public eye, to assert dominance, to feel powerful. It's the same mechanism, using a fictional warrior avatar to bolster your real-world identity. It shields the vulnerable human underneath.
That makes sense. It's like power posing, but with a costume. But you said it was a two-way street. The source talks about a reverse import.
This is fascinating. The influence went from Japan to New York, and then it bounced back to Japan. Japanese artists saw what Wu-Tang did. They saw how cool they made Asian culture look through this gritty lens, and it changed their art.
So Japanese artists started making hip-hop.
Yes, but specifically, artists like DJ Crush and Shingo 2 resonated with the Zen aspects of RZA's work. They saw their own culture reflected back at them through hip-hop, but with this new, gritty American edge. It gave them permission to mix the traditional with the modern.
And now we see it in anime itself.
We do. Look at a massive hit like Jujutsu Kaisen. The endings often feature these stylish, lo-fi hip-hop tracks, or Chainsaw Man, which uses this chaotic punk rap energy. Anime has reconnected with street language.
It's a feedback loop. Wu-Tang took from the East, remixed it with the streets, and sent it back. Now, Japanese creators are taking that street energy and putting it back into the anime.
It's seamless now. You watch an anime opening today, and it sounds like a track that could have been on a mixtape in the 90s. The walls between the genres have completely dissolved.
That's the power of what the source calls the global myth.
Let's land on that because that's the big conclusion of the article, this concept of warrior poetics.
Warrior Poetics. I like that title. What does it mean in this context?
This is the synthesis. The source argues that ultimately hip-hop and anime share a single, unified myth. They might look different, one has dragons and robots, the other has lowriders and turntables, but at their core, they're the same story.
And what is that story?
It's the story of how one trains oneself to fight the world.
How one trains oneself to fight the world. That really strips away all the surface-level differences, doesn't it?
Think about it. Whether you're in a fictional dojo or on a real street corner, the internal struggle is identical. It's about discipline. It's about quietude, finding stillness in the face of chaos. And it's about the belief that you can improve your station in life, that you can level up through sheer dedication to your craft.
The source puts it beautifully. The microphone is a sword and life is a dojo.
That's it. That's the one. That's why this connection has lasted for over 30 years. It's not a trend. It's an archetype. Wu-Tang Clan didn't just borrow a few sound bites. They translated the samurai spirit into a language that the modern world, and specifically the marginalized youth of the modern world, could understand and use.
It's really a testament to how culture works. Nothing is ever just one thing. It's always being remixed, repurposed, and revitalized.
And usually the most interesting things happen at the edges, where two things that shouldn't touch collide. That's where the sparks fly.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the Wu-Tang effect, the source leaves us with a bit of a challenge. It's a final provocation that I think is worth chewing on.
Go for it.
We've established that the microphone is a sword and life is a dojo. So for you, listening, whether you're an artist, a coder, a parent, whatever, what is your version of the Shaolin discipline?
That is the question.
Mm-hmm.
We all have our battles. We all have obstacles that feel like they're too big to overcome. But if you approach your daily grind, your spreadsheet, your workout, your commute, with that level of warrior poetic intensity, that changes the game.
It turns the mundane into a mission. It gives you that training arc mindset where you aren't just suffering through it, you're leveling up.
And that is the enduring lesson of the Wu-Tang Clan. You don't need a temple to be a monk. You just need the discipline.
Absolutely. Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. We hope this gave you a new perspective on those classic tracks and maybe a new appreciation for the anime queue on your TV.
Keep training.
See you in the next one.